On your Facebook, don't worry, I mentioned historical memory.
Rabbi Shapiro.
Yeah, I know you
Just say a few. Can you just say a few words? No, just say what is it? What is this? Just say it's a one. What is this event? What is the event? Just 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. Just say what the event is.
We're gathered here for the Yortzait of our dear Mashpia, Reb Mailach, Olav Sholem, Zwieble. The whole yeshiva is here. Yeshiva, Tevchet Mimim, Tiferes Bachurim, the Smicha Bachrim, community members, Anash. We're all here together as a Kinnesis Oideris in honor of Reb Mailach.
Tune in. It's going to be a tribute to Rabbi Zwieble. Very special event with very special stories. Very important to learn from. So stick around and watch to the end. Got to be resourceful. Always best to be resourceful. But resourceful means you always find a way. You find a solution. You don't make excuses. You don't say I can't. You always just find a way. Always find a way. Always a way.
So which way did you just do?
So just remember this. Rabbi Shapiro, who doesn't do videos ever, to make an introduction. I made a small clip. Keep it entertaining for the audience also. You know what I mean?
You listen last night, right?
I'm not the same Steve.
What?
Where's those light snacks? Where's the light refreshments?
Story, right?
You have no idea how hard it is. What? I hate it. There was a survey done, I think most Americans would rather be dead. There was an actual survey done, and I'm one of those people.
Yes, Toastmaster.
Under 13, you can charge that.
Whatever he has to do now.
Where's Yehuda? Alex, where's Alex?
Who's there?
Who's there?
Alex.
Just in case I don't feel like I'm like the hero right now.
Women.
What I used to do.
Alex, what's the Facebook page that is going to be broadcast? Because I want to post this Yankee winner. What? Can you be exactly?
20 years later,
You didn't tell me any broadcast.
It's just on Facebook. Decide it right now.
Facebook could be 12,000 people. I'm not happy.
You're like a radio.
Albie says he could do it without anything else at all.
You have a better. Yeah, here.
even that, even though you guys keep showing up now, Travis is always one. It's Facebook. It's already like 5 minutes.
Facebook.
This is more about
Slash what?
Here we go. Here's the live. There we go. Look at this. I can see it live. You watch the that's in timing. No, that's not. You just have to be on computers. Facebook page. Maybe the Yeshiva could share it. If who's in charge of Yeshiva? How would I people call this? You have a search. Maybe if they're a bit of a college. How do you do that? How do you do that? Or
I'm in here, but you have people all over.
okay, fine.
Cutting edge.
I can ask everybody to take seats. Seats up front. This is obviously not an event for which any of us looked forward to. But nevertheless, it's definitely upon us a chiyuv, an obligation, a schus, a merit, as well as all of our rotzen, it's our will, it's what we all feel we should be doing, to devote some time this evening to Reb Mailach, to Reb Mailach, Reb Tzvi Yaakov, Olav Hasholem. And we will do so in the way always done by Chassidim, of sharing, of remembering, and what is most important, as the Rebbe says, to take to heart, to remember in a way of niskorim v'nasim, to remember in a way of implementing it in our lives in Maaseh B'Poel, until we come to the time when we will no longer need such events and such memories, but it will be al kitzav aran and sheikh neyofer v'hu b'seicham b'seich klal Yisrael take it from me yad mamish. As the Rebbe mentioned on a number of occasions in a very emotive way, quoting the Rambam of Talmud Shegola, Maglin Rabbi Imoi, that wherever a Chosid goes, it is impossible for his Rebbe not to be with him. And that applies the Zeh Ubebo, it applies in anywhere, in any setting, and it is clear, as the Rebbe, my knowledge serves me correctly, a number of times been again to when the Rebbe was speaking of Chassidim who had passed on, the Rebbe said, "Jetzt ist mit schwer," that he is now with the Rebbe, and this is a something clear and felt by all of us, that a Chosid, any Chosid, especially with the stature of Reb Mailach, is with the Rebbe, and in that sense we'd like to ask Neinekol Reb Mailach, Schneer Goldberg, to read with us the Rebbe's Kapitel, and if I can ask everybody to stand.
Artiki is running away, Skyly Tahanonai. Kitas Nadi over Yamayakra. Abafon, Abani Havim of the Tarship, some Tarbi of him, so. Shame the egg, Anon the Maltanashi. Hanan in Tzadik, Meli, Namrachim. Shemim Sam the night, Delight to be like Yeshua. Shubina Shibla and I call Anina, Kamala, Lifey. Kihati, Nina Shimim is the same with them as Dragon Dachi. Sarach Nani, Vertis Achayim. Haman Tikita, Ani Anisim Yoid. Ani Marti Vahasika, Adam Kaiser. Swashi Vadina, Kotabuni Alai. Kaiti Shoy Sasha, Ocean Niagara. And Ardina Shalane, Nagdan Oklahoma. Yakar Vainodina, and Mosel Azida. Anadina Kenny of Dach, Ani of Dachaman, and I was Gat of the Marseille. Rosberg Zavach, Shaman Yakra. And Ardina Shalim, Nagdan Oklahoma. The Hajish Basin in the Hives, the Rechish, Hallelujah.
As everything is, Ba'ashkocha Protis, briefly, we are in the week of Chayesora. We all know Chaye Sora, as the Rebbe's Medayik, and Shturim's Chaye Sora. This is the continuation and the implementation of the life of Sora, even though we start off the Parsha straight away with the physical passing of Sora, but nevertheless this is the time, precisely here it is where the life of Sora begins to have its impact. The Mailach was a mashpia, the thousands, Hekim, Adorim, thousands and thousands of Talmidim and Mushpoim, all here and alive, Kankai, Poikai, Yom Hazeh, here functioning as shluchim, as mashpiyim on their own, as people in communities, and in many, many facets. The true Shnei Chaye Sora is what we are marking and remembering and speaking of here. As well, of course, the incredible Hashkocha Pratis felt by all of us last year, when this happened in Erev Chof Cheshvan. You can say quite honestly, without any exaggeration, that very few people in this generation embodied and lived the Chassidus of the Rebbe Rashab, Chassidus in general, and the Rebbe Rashab's Chassidus like Mailach. It's just a factual thing, as well as obviously Mailach devoting his life to Temchet Mimim, to the yeshiva that the Rebbe Rashab was Meyasid. Temchet Mimim has been here for 120 years. We just marked the anniversary, and for over 50 of those years, Mailach worked in Temchet Mimim and was one of its central figures in our generation. In that vein, we'd like to ask our Manal, Rav Moshe Hirson, to begin the evening.
Has passed. To some perhaps it flew away, to some it was not, didn't flew away, didn't go so fast, but that's the reality. We are now, as mentioned before, Parshas Chai Sora. This event connects the Yortzait of Mailach and the Yom HaKodesh from Chof Cheshvan, birth of the Rebbe Rashab. I worked at Rebbe Mailach over 50 years. There are other speakers here, and I don't want to stay here too long, although the time deserves that. But what can I tell you? This is about the years that he spent learning and answering questions and being madrich, the Talmidim. You know that. Everybody knows that. The Gadlus, the greatness of Mailach, Nigla, Chassidus, Kabbalah, you name it, and he was there, you know. We once had the Choshev Erov here that came to say a shir. And Mailach was sitting there in the back and listening to the shir. And at one point, Mailach asked him a question, but the question came from a sefer from this Rav's grandfather. And this, the Rav became a Bishas Meister. You could see that he was taken by one of the Rosh Yeshivas is asking me a question from my grandfather's sefer. You know, so, but this was Rav Mailach. So there's no question about that. What I'm going to say is just the dedication, the Begegebenkeit of the person to the position, to the responsibilities, the chinuch, preparing his father-in-law told me that as many times that Mailach learned this mimer, for example, you should know that if he is going to learn this mimer tonight to the Bochrim or in the morning, so he is preparing the mimer. Like this is the first time. There was a tremendous Ernstkeit, seriousness to the issue, And to make it Mikitsu, this in itself shows that the Mailach was here. He's supposed to be here, but by 7:30 in the morning. He was here every day, 7:15, 7:20, probably not later than that. He made sure that he is here and settled down by the beginning of the Seder. And this was his life. He went to California. He didn't travel much. He went to California for a simcha from one of the children. And at that time, he was getting ready to leave. So one of his children mentioned that this in 2 days is the Obsherenish of my Ingo. His son, his grandson of Rav Mailach, was Obsherenish in 2 days from now. So Rav Mailach said the yeshiva is starting this Sunday. It's important for me to be there. And he left California. He was not by the Obsherenish 2 days before. You know, would anybody have any kindness? Of course not. But this was his sense of responsibility. The yeshiva is starting on Sunday. He wants to be here. I'll leave the rest for the others. The loss is obvious that this is a loss not only for Morristown. The loss was for Klal Chabad in the entire world, and the loss was for the world in general. And so there were not two Mailachs around here, you know, with all the anivas. It was a tremendous loss. The loss is still being felt. On the other hand, the consolation is the thousands of Talmidim that went through here, Morristown, and Newark. He started out in Newark. That still, to this day, they remember the Shir, the Yurim, and the Adrocha, and the conversations that Ramelach had with them. There was a time, for many years, he used to seclude himself in his room and call every Talmud one by one. He had a list to have a conversation with him in learning about his life, his satisfaction in the yeshiva, everything. He had a rishima, he had a list. He went one by one, and every time he was always speaking to a bocher. I probably went over that list several times a year. You know. I told Rabbi Shapiro that I'm going to be very short. Let me connect this with another issue, Fabrengen, that I heard from Peres Mochkin. And I'll leave the rest to you for your judgment and for your intelligence. Peres Mochkin, I don't blame you if you don't know the name, but just like it's important to learn Chassidus, it's important also to know the Divrei Yimei Chassidus and Divrei Yimei Chasidim, to know the Chassidim, and especially if we can't go back to the days of the Alter Rebbe, at least the Chassidim that were here by the Rebbe. And Peres Mochkin was one of them. Chassidish Reed, smart, special person. You know. And there was a period in some 70s that was a difficult period to everybody, for the Rebbe too. And Peres Mochkin came from Montreal, and he was having Fabrengens in some 70 private homes. Peres, in his own way, was trying to establish something, a sense of direction, a sense of serenity. And in one of those Fabrengens, Peres told us that in the times of the Rebbe Rashab, Baal Simcha from today, in the times of the Rebbe Rashab, he sent one of his Talmidim as a Shaliach in Eretz Yisrael. It was unusual in those days. The Rebbe Rashab sent him to Eretz Yisrael as a Shaliach. Years passed, and it became the stalkus of the Rebbe Rashab. And one day, Rabbi Peretz told us, and by the Fabriken, that he was home, and one of his Haverim came in and knocked on the door, came into the Rabbi Peretz's house, and he looked terrible. His face, Rabbi Peretz saw that there's something afflicting this man terribly, and yes, was him there. So he said to him, Rabbi Peretz, I have bad news. I had a bad cholem, a bad dream. So Rabbi Peretz says, what's it? He says, I dreamt that our Chaver, that the Rebbe Rashab sent to Eretz Yisrael, was nifter. So Rabbi Peretz said that he thought that you lost of him. I screamed at him. What's it? You're going to take all your dreams so seriously? With seriousness, you had a dream and you come to tell me this and you're repeating this. Go home and forget about this and try good with sein good. The Chassid calmed down a little bit and he said that Peretz, in that dream there was a second part to the dream. So what's this? He said, in that dream I saw the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab was telling the Malachim, give him mir, give him to me. Given meiner Ashriach in Eretz Yisrael. The parents told him to go home and forget it. Tracht good, don't take this so serious just because you had a dream. At any event, the dream turned out to be a reality. Something like a week later, they received a letter that this Shaliach of the Rebbe Rashab, this Chassid, this Chaver of theirs, was indeed nifter in that day that he had a home. So Rabbi said that as much as I tried to console him and to tell him not to think about this, but the reality was that it was true. It was a Cholem Shalemes. It was a message. So Rabbi says, if the first part of the Cholem turned out to be true, emes, then the second part of the Cholem is emes. The second part of the Cholem was the Rebbe Rashab is saying to the Malachim that you have no jurisdiction over him. As minor. Given minor Shaliach in Eretz Yisrael. I'll leave this to you. In this day, we remember the coming together, and for this purpose, remembering the Mailach. Could be that we didn't even have to wait for the Yortzait. This took place a long time ago. And as God brought this, the Shir Tanya, everything that the Rabbeim did was meduyik. Everything had a time, that there was a reason, nothing is superficial. The Shir Tanya of tomorrow is talking about Tainug and Neshomas began Eden. The Neshomas that are now in Gan Eden, and they have Tainug from Asoga Satoira, and the Elikus that they hear there, and in order to be able to absorb that Elikus, you need Levushim, and the Alter Rebbe describes in the Shir Tanya of today and tomorrow about the Levushim and so on. And he talks about this as a Dalet Meir Shekel Kesef. This is this Parsha. The Dalet Meir Shekel Kesef that Avram gave to Avram Avinu turned out to be something temporarily negative, but this transfers itself to the union from Dalet Meir's Oilem is the Sufrim, the Oilem is that the Tainuk from Tainuk and Neshomas they began. This is in today's Shir, the Shir of tomorrow. That has to do with the Rebbe Rashab, no question about that. Have to do with Mailach as well. He is Zichrei Baruch, we should meet only on Simchas, and no question that the schus von thousands of Talmidim, that was the Gata Adroche and the Limud Atera, Nigel and Chassidus from him, but the Megan sein von alle Unionen, and that's so, and the same thing for his Mishpocha, that they have sort of status issues when I come.
Ist eine Schein, aber wie der Gerechtheit sagt. Wenn man darf das nicht mechanisch sein, es ist da Beteva von einer Schome. Der Munde von Aid ist nicht eine Sache, was sie kommt zu von draußen. Der Kurs scheint in Aid. Was wir davon tun, ist Megale sein. Das. Und durch Limo der Teire und befragt durch Limo der Chassidus wird es nicht Gale. Also wie ein Mensch, der trägt eine Scheine, Kunstmann hat nicht verstehen, wie sei, alles Bräut, wird stärker, wird nicht essen die Bräut. So, Kunstmann versteht nicht, wie trägt fort, oder wie Plan fort, sich nicht auch aufsetzen auf dem Trägen. Sagt mir nein. Der trägt fort, Sie versteht ja, sie versteht nicht von was. Und der ist der Leon und Teire und Kiyom HaMitzvah, sie limut Achsides. Das im Mentale, das ist Said und Beteva. In der Meile, die Aschkoche Protis und Emune und Bitochen, das sind nicht Sachen, was darf escapen und drüßen. Hat das Beätzen. Zeit, was sie gewähnt letztens, was sie gewähnt sehr schwere Jahren. Sie gewähnt Hungerjahren, was nicht gehabt was essen, und Menschen sind Rachman al-Islam Nifter geworden, Poshet nicht was essen. Willkommen Zeit. Es gewähnt Aid, was sie gewähnt sehr nicht gesund. Und Tage, nicht gehabt was essen, ist der Tage von dem weg. Ist süß gegangen, aber der Tag, was Nifter geworden, dass sie gewähnt die Testkisle. Schul hat mich verbracht. Und der Ried hat Poshet, ich bin nicht gesund, aber die letzte Tage, die letzte paar Show von seinem Leben, hat gebeten, wir sollen führen mit dem Bett in Schul, wo wir verbringen, die Verbringen, der Covid des Kisle, will sein bei den Verbringen. Tag habe, und er genommen mit dem Bett, mit dem kranken Bett, und hat ihn reingeführt mit dem Verbringen, und er hat dort nicht geworden. Schas die Idos hat das erzählt, ist auch von Russland, ist rein auf Jechides zum Reben, hat erzählt hat die Meise. Hat der Rebbe ihm gesagt, dass sie gewähnt, nach Orte für das Kisle, hat ihm der Rebbe gesagt, bei dem Verbringen, die Jori das Kisle, bis ich sie Verbringen, die soll am Anfang der Verbringen mit die Meise. Was ist die Meise? Was ist der Zeichen von die Meise? Aber ich sehe mich gewähnt, der Verbringe für das Kisle, was ich teiere, Aid, Eider, wird nicht der Minerelo, was hat in Sinne, sitzen mit Chsidim, mit das Kisle mal verbringen, mit das Kisle, Chsidische Verbringe, Bechlal, das ist doch der Anfang von der Chossi, die der Deutsche die sich ist. Dieser Verbringe, wo Sieden sitzen zusammen, mit Leibsachitzer zusammen, wir verbringen zusammen, wir kommen von dem Tog mit das Kisle, das ist der Aschole von der jeme der Gregorim, der Tag für das Kisle, und die das besitzt alle zusammen beachten, uns Lachaim, Lachaim.
There are things which we can speak of in many facets about Reb Mailach. It was mentioned, and I'm sure it will be mentioned many times, of his incredible knowledge, incredible idea in Torah, the whole mechmane Torah in every area in Torah. However, that is something which doesn't come in a vacuum. It doesn't come on its own. I'll share with you just a very short memory that I have of a few weeks before Mailach was nifter. It was same Gedalia. So it was upstairs in the Zal in Tiferes, and it was a minyan. We were davening. It was yeshiva's off, and not too many people, and so you have to. The Mailach used to stay in Lubavitch. It takes 60 people to make a minyan. Yeah, so. And we were waiting. The Mailach was up to Haidu. We were waiting. That there should be a minyan. Stem Gedalia. On the table there was a Samach Vov. I'll never forget this. The Mailach picks up the Samach Vov. He opens up to the first page. With his hand, starts learning the first Maimon and Samach Vov. And I'm thinking to myself, I know firsthand. I worked a little on the writing of Shiurim. The Mailach knew Samach Vov backwards and forwards. Anybody here, it was an obvious thing. The first Maimon Samach Vov, he was learning one line after another line. It was a meridic thing to see, because that we always knew Yasser Mailach Hashayla. It was like pressing a computer. So Chag gave Shishin 10 Maramokim, one after the next. It was, you know, and you felt, with every Maramokim, you felt the deflation of your Yeshus went, you know, in a phenomenal way. But that doesn't happen from nothing. That doesn't happen from Essen and Schloffen. That happens from learning, and we should, if there's any lesson of Achayit and Adiboy, that you've never learned something enough times. There's never, you should learn. That didn't exist. You learn, weiter, it's the first Maim of Samach Vov, it's the first Maim of Samach Vov. I'd like to call Mendel Goldberg, an Adam and a member of the administration here in Yeshiva, to say a few words.
I had the schus to know my shver for over 23 years. The Chayit and Eliboy. The lot I learned, a lot I can still learn from him. I hear the whole time everyone saying he's mashpia, he's an advisor, he's a rav. To me, he was my shver and the grandfather of my children. My shver is known, he never ever wasted any time. In all the years we go into his house, I don't recall once seeing him sitting on the couch having a conversation. I don't think he ever sat on the couch. I don't recall such a thing. Every time I walk into the house, for whatever reason, first thing he used to tell me it's a vart, the new vart he saw from a Maimer, a new Shimon, something came out. That was the first, everything by him was a new vart, a new fabrengen. Every meal, every Shabbos meal I ate there, every Yom Tov meal was a fabrengen. There was no 2 minutes, maybe talk about something, it would turn into Fabrengen immediately. I remember the first time I met him, I got engaged right after Gimel Tammuz, and at that time they just discovered the Rishimis. And he, as everyone knows, was very into it, and he worked on it. And I remember I was sitting at my parents' house in Crown Heights, it was 2 months after Gimel Tammuz. I never learned that in Morristown. I was here at YSB a few years, staff member, the camper, but I never had interaction with him. He opens the door and I'm sitting and waiting. I'm nervous, I'm engaged. He opens the door, must have just came in from the Hakkason with holding his hands in the Shimmis. And his first thing he looks at me and he says, "Gesant the Shimmis, Givalda Kenyanim." Just came, remember that seer, that was the first thing I ever saw from him. I said to him, every meal, just to say a little point how it's important, and this thing comes out, and you don't realize how it seeps in when you sit in the car. I used to take him driving a lot with him. He always had a safe with him, and always put a chassidim, saying stories, little part to show how this seeps in. When I got married, my wife was working then in Kahas. It was right after Gimel Tammuz. Until then, they never had women. She was the first woman they hired, and she worked upstairs. The cute thing, she worked upstairs in the office, and she answered phone calls. It was in Carlo. One day, she gets a phone call from someone, and says, usually phone call is, could you want to order 20 sedurim, 20 potatoes, whatever it was. A man answers, she answers the phone, hello, America's Publication, can I help you? Can you please transfer to the showroom, okay? Showroom, no one answers. I'm sorry, no one's available. He goes, any man available? Says, no, there's no man, no one's available. Besides, I have a question, but a woman won't understand it. Ask me for a man. She goes, we hear your question. There's no one available. What can I do for you? I bought a bunch of svarim, and there's a mistake. It's a misprint. I need to get a new. It's a meister. I need to get a new svarim. So I'm sorry, I'm not a man, but maybe I can help you. So I went over to the Titus for a shul, and it's missing. There's a certain maimer missing from the Titus. Missing the old I'm missing them, yeah. Parsha Shaftim is missing. My wife on the spot, because I'm sorry, I'm not a man, but the Torah does not have Parsha Shaftim. The phone was quiet for a little bit. She came home, she told me, how is it a 20-year-old girl who's got married? How did she know this? That the Torah doesn't have Shaftim. She told me it's just one reason, because at our house, every Shabbos, every time, because the Torah is always mentioned, all this was always mentioned. Anyone who knows my Shver also remembers when a new Sefer came, a new liquid, he was we came like a different person. It's another interesting, cute thing I remember which had an effect on me. I remember when I used to come for Shabbos from the first year when I was married, and he used to call my wife all the time to ask him, and I used to come and I used to shimmer so, and I used to, you didn't have into it anyway, but there was one thing I'd done anyway. Anything new came out. So I remember my wife told him once that either was a new print or it was out of print, or a new, one of the Seif Ma'amarach Matmur Zakin, those orange red svarim, Taf of Samach, I remember which year it was, is a new print, new came out now. He was calling, I remember, daily. The month, Kumfa Shabbos, the Vergessen Shabbos, musste bringen dem Sefer. I remember this. Comes Friday morning, he called. We come to the house Friday afternoon, I come for Shabbos, with no phones then to be able to afford the cell phone days. And he's literally, hears the car come down, he runs outside, Nus, back to Sefer! I gave him the Sefer, his face lit up. The only way to explain this is about Smakovit, I said in English from that. And I saw him, he was a different person at Shabbos. Shabbos morning, I come downstairs, he comes to me, as a matter of fact, Derech Agav. Nogmaals danken in Sefer. The eerste drittel van Sefer, this is a Sefer, you know, in Yeshivas they learned this a couple of years. The eerste drittel, in Emes Gewen, we used to name the of Magd Rebbe Yaakov. So everyone tell me this. This is shame in Yonim, so Emes Gewen, we used to zweite drittel Gewen, he names a different als Mamar will cut immer sagen, dritte Gewen, nahe in Yonim, nahe sagen, Sachen, sehr nagat, sehr schön, diesen Dank. You know, overnight, he didn't like Derech Agav. He finished that Sefer, and he just like repeating it to me, said Derech Agav, what that means. I also remember another little thing about my Kiddush, just this impression I saw of his learning. By Kiddush, I remember it was right after Gimel Tammuz then, so it was not yet set up how Kiddushim had done. So Kiddush was downstairs. Now I think it's done in the basement 770 as a whole system. Then it was not planned, so we had the Kiddush in the 770 itself. Downstairs, they, the last minute decided 5 chasanim together. In 770 was noise, no one prepared anything. And Shvel turns around, no, Maimer darf man sagen. So Baruch Hashem, I had a few Maimer prepared for my Sheva brachas, but there was one chassan there who did not have. It was a very chassan Avacha then. He was very close to my Shver from beforehand. He was now against Mashpiyah, so he didn't have anything prepared. Shver said, say something. So he started saying things, no one really listened. He finished, Shver turns to him, I heard him tell him this, he knew him, so just to understand that he didn't stop say that. He was Achabis L'chaim, and he knew this Bacher, he tells him, he's got that mind that came was given. He started rattling off like 10 different Maramakaimis, this Genumina from the Shavuos Chavav, with Pesach Chavzayin, I don't remember which one he was using, but he was just saying over a bunch of Tazvav for that Shabbos. So it was just an interesting thing to see. I remember also last year was for Yom Kippur when he fell and he was taken to the hospital overnight. So people who were here saw him, his eye was totally blown up. They thought he lost his eye. They thought it was mamish gefährlich. Even Yom Kippur came to shul, we couldn't see his eye. So he was sitting in the hospital and his eye couldn't move. He was semi-conscious and he was looking to something while the doctors take tests to learn something. And he finds in his pocket a piece of paper, a shtickle from a maimer. And he was sitting with one eye like that. It was pretty hard. He needs something. He finished it. He tells my wife to call me. He tells me, he gave something to Stub. And he wants to get something. Gave Dart and gave me for Malchus. And he couldn't stop. I came to his house. The first thing, he was sitting in the hospital with his one eye like that. And he just couldn't for 2 minutes be without a sefer. With all that, he was still, what impressed me was still an unbelievable, devoted family man. Anytime he would come to the house, he could be sitting in the middle of learning a Maimer, Samach Vav, anything, he would stop immediately. For any kid, to play with the Eineklach, talk to them. I remember it was over 20 years ago, we were in California together, and we had little kids then. I asked them, kids want to go somewhere. Let's go boating. I thought he'll want to go. Yeah, he wants to go, okay. We went to, I think it was Newport Beach or Long Beach, Gedenknis. We went next to, was a quiet, secluded beach area, and the Mailach is going, with a safe in the side, and it was a tzir to see him sitting there, and he's sitting there in the side learning, and every time we look at Zaidi, you want to play ball? And the spot was just funny to see him playing ball with his, by the water, with the safe in his hand. But no matter what, whenever a kid, Eilu Kokain used to come, he used to call up every single child, sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, Einikol, for every single birthday. And he made sure to call like Shkia time. We're not waiting. Every birthday, he had a var to say. He called up and he spent as much time, which is a unbelievable lesson to learn. Someone who was Terasim Unasik Pshite, as I said, he sat and learned all day. As I said before, I was in the house. I never ever saw him doing anything but sitting and learning. I think by the meal, he used to read the Kvar Chabad. That's it. But even at a meal, he sat and learned. I remember also, I'd say Hanukkah Geld. He had a minute to give every Einikul every single day who was here. Every day of Hanukkah, did I ever said that? Every Hanukkah he gave Hanukkah Geld. At the second Shkia came, we used to call up, and avoid the kinder, that I came and gave Hanukkah Geld. Kids came, and obviously they all know exactly where to go. That iconic chair he sat for over 45 years, sitting there 15 hours a day. And from 2 years old, the kids didn't say, where's Aid? He came into the house and knew exactly where to go to, which table to go to, where he's sitting and doing. And it was just impressive for the kids, he used to tell me. He's sitting and learning, and no matter what, he'll stop on the spot. If my 2-year-old daughter would want to play with him a game, he'll stop and play with her in the middle of his Samach Vav or Gemara. So Zayna kids are around the Sheikh Alpha Buddha Seicham, and we should learn a lot from this great man.
And it does segue into our next speaker, a little Hoisofa, which obviously goes along with everything we said. And I saw this in the few years that I'm here. Obviously, many people here for many decades saw this, know this, remember this. Mailach was an incredible community person. There was nobody that he didn't have time for in the community. Anash, people, that was him. There was time for everybody. I remember when Rabbi Grona in Australia used to tell us, in Chabad we have time for everybody. And that was Mailach had time for everybody. Nobody was too small, too ignorant. Mailach had time for everybody. In that vein, I'd like to call Moshe Morgenstern, president of the congregation Levi Yitzchak, a long-time community member, to say a few words.
Rabbi Shapiro asked me to give over impressions and memories of a regular community member about Rabbi Zwieble. And the truth is, Rabbi Zwieble has been a presence in my life pretty much throughout my entire adult life. I came to Tiferes as a 20-year-old, newly minted Baal Tshuva, not much older than the Bachrim here, certainly the same age as the Smicha Bachrim. And in those days, whoever came to Morristown, it didn't take long, you heard about Rabbi Zwieble. It was made clear to me that we had in Morristown a great treasure, a giant, Rabbi Zwieble. Now, of course, as young men often do with our heroes, and remember, we were Bali Tshuva looking for role models, and he was a hero, his legend grew every time we spoke of him. According to one opinion, if you stuck a pin in a word on any page in any Masechta, he could tell you what was on what word it stuck through on the other page. We also extolled his Luftmenschkeit. He was like all geniuses. He was absent-minded. He never drove a car, frankly. Then there's a story where he brought a screwdriver to fix a flat tire. These are agadas. I don't know if they're true or not. But you have to understand, for us both of them, this was somehow further proof of his greatness. He was a true Rukni. But despite our exaggerations, he certainly was a remarkable Talmud Chacham, obviously a veritable encyclopedia of Hasidus and Nigla, and others tonight will be better able to describe his gadlus in those areas. I was very lucky that I got to sit in his class for Hasidus. The older class in Tiferes went through a period where we never really had a steady teachers, Rabbi Person. So we had a wide variety of substitutes. Fortunately for us, sometimes it works in your favor, we got Rabbi Zwieble 1 year. We learned the classics, Ranat, Samavov, Derech Misweisecha. I'll never forget sitting in the room. This was in the early days. We were, before renovations, it was a little wrecked up, the Shio room, and there were holes in the walls. And I remember him sitting there, behind him written, Mailach Poires Geder. I'll never forget. He was completely, didn't notice it. With him, Hasidus wasn't some kind of mystical stuff, but a system. Lahavdil, like biology or mathematics. His ability to make Hasidus real was unmatched. And the class roster included some of the most successful Balei Tshuva in Lubavitch today. Guys like Zvi Friedman, who wrote the Sefer Bringing Heaven Down to Earth, and he's now the rabbi of Chabad.org's Ask the Rabbi. Menachem Schmidt, of course, everybody knows, a very, very well-known Shaliach in Philadelphia. Shmuel Dechter, Simcha Frankel, who are well-known Menalim of large schools here and in LA. These were guys who could hardly read Hebrew a few years before, but with Rabbi Zwieble, they were learning, Samach Vav in Yiddish. As I matured and got married and settled down here, Rabbi Zwieble was an integral part of the community life in Morristown. It turns out that despite his head being in the Himmel, in the heavens, his feet were in fact planted firmly on the ground. Many of us young couples went to him for what turned out to be very practical and important life coaching. He was also an important resource in the laws of family purity. He was here for many years for Simchas Torah. Now, for Simchas Torah, every town needs a Ratzu v'Shuv. The Ratzu was Rabbi Zwieble. If it was up to him, we would farbring in the sukkah till midnight before starting our Torah races. The Shuv, of course, is the guy who makes sure we started on time. That was usually Rabbi Spalter's brother, Shmuel David, and in recent years, Rabbi Shapiro. Mayim Shalom. We always drew water for the Shmur Matzahs at his house in late winter or early spring, with snow still on the ground. If you were making a movie about Shemesh Yid, you would use his house as a set. Simple, Spartan, literally set in the backwoods. You had to drive past the hillbillies to get there. He had only what he needed, but he literally had a well of Mayim Chayim on his property. That's very symbolic to me. I don't know about you. For him, we went from house to house, making a l'chaim at each stop, but we would always plan to meet at Rabbi Zwiebel's house as the last stop before mincha. And there was always a crowd. You got a piece of honey cake, a l'chaim, and a vort, and in return, he usually had a payment in mind from you, usually a new hachlot that you would have to take on for the coming year. He extolled the redemptive power of consistency, regular, repetitive mitzvahs. For example, I heard him say many times that for businessmen, mincha with a minyan is the greatest mitzvah, because you tear yourself away from your oilamish occupation to take time out to be with Hashem. He also emphasized being Maggid the Sedra in both Chumash and Likutei Torah, week in, week out. Though he was a master of the mystical, he was always also very down to earth. I'm the fundraiser for the shul. And whenever there was a collection, such as for Simchas Torah or needs of the shul, he always participated. Mind you, I'd never ask him. He would come to me. He didn't want to pull rank. If this is what the Kehillah is doing, this is what he did. I also don't ever recall him discussing his yichus or accomplishments as a choizer, an editor. I'm sure he had many interactions with the Rebbe, but he never mentioned it. Rabbi Elimelech Zwieble was one of those rare combinations who was at once a great chassid, but also had a huge personality. In bygone generations, they had great chassidim like Shmuel Menkes and Moshe Meislis. In the last century, we had figures like Itchi Damasmi, Zusha the Partisan, Reb Nissen, who amongst thousands of their peers still live on with us today. There's no doubt in my mind that in 100 years, when they talk about the chassidim of our Rebbe, his name will live on. One final note for you, Bochurim. As you grow and move on in your careers as shluchim or rabbis or educators, you'll be called on to farbreng from time to time. Learn how to farbreng the Rabbi Zwieble way. I once saw him in Jerusalem keep a room full of younger light spellbound for 6 hours on a Shabbos afternoon. And I'm going to tell you Rabbi Zwiebel's secret for successful farbringing. First, warm them up with a niggin. Then, make a l'chaim. That's the real important part. After that, a quick 4 to 7 minute Dvar Torah. Then, let them talk amongst themselves for 3 or 4 minutes. Repeat as needed. Thank you.
We know that the Baalei Moledus of the Rebbe Rashav, we we know from the Sichos that the Gebalgert spent 10 years, was the number that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave, on choosing every neshama that would go through Temchet Tmimim. That's how we have it in tradition. And however, there are Tmimim, and there are those who make Tmimim, who make it be that Tmimim should be Tmimim. And again, also Mailach's self was Yidin Temchet Tmimim, was the Mashpia in Temchet Tmimim. And in this sense, we'll ask Rabbi Loshansky, Rabbi Kehila, and the Magachir and Yeshiva to give us his impressions.
We hear everything is about Hashgacha Pratis. I heard some before told a story about how the Rebbe Nishma Seiden said to the Malachim, "Give him to me, he is mine." Hashgacha Pratis. I read today. They sent it over the WhatsApps. Rav Meir Itkin wrote it with his hand, and he tells the following story. So his father was Chaim Zalman Itkin, Chassidish Elit. He passed away. He was in his 36th year. He was a young man. He passed away on Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh Nisan Tov Reish Pei. It's one day before the Rebbe Nishma Seiden passed away on Beis Nisan. He was interred on Sunday, Beis Nisan. At that time, took time to travel. News took time to travel. A couple of days later, his wife had a dream. He came to her in her dream, and he said that after he was put in the grave, he wasn't there for too long, because he saw the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was going, and the Shamas were going after him, and I went after him. That's what she dreamt 2-3 days after he passed away, and then they found out that indeed the Rebbe Nishma Seiden passed on that day. I saw it. He wrote it down with his hand, that this is what he heard from his mother. Mailach came the Mailach for Chav Cheshbon. As mentioned before, my wife had a brother, Yortzait Yogan, was a 19-year-old, very, very choshev bacher, passed away suddenly. The Shabbos after that, he passed away on Friday night. The Shabbos after by the Fabrengen, the Rebbe said to my father-in-law, sitzt und hört Chassidus vom Schwer. He's sitting and hears Chassidus from my father-in-law. This is how Chassidim are. When we're talking about Chav Cheshbon, the Hashgacha Pratis, the year Tovshin Mentes, the Rebbe came out and he said that people, all people, should try to make it a point of coming on Chav Cheshbon to Tomchet Mimim. There's Tomchet Mimim in town to come to Tomchet Mimim. Since Tomchet Mimim is the work in which the Rebbe Nishma Seiden put himself in, with that he created Tmimi, so people should come and bodily, physically be in Tomchet Mimim, the Torah, Avodah, and Milas Chasodim, with that to be imbued and to get what it is that the Rebbe Nishma Seiden has given to every single person that has a shaychus to Tomchet Mimim. We're talking about Mailach Zwieble, and people marvel. It is a person like, a Superman. His knowledge was phenomenal. Every single aspect of life, in everything. A person of tremendous wisdom. The Torah is Chachma. And at the same time, very, very practical and down to earth. And what's most most characteristic of Reb Mailach. You spoke to him, and he spoke to anybody like to an equal. This is a man that was beyond, that was towering above everybody, and you didn't feel it in him. Why is that? Because there is one thing that characterizes Reb Mailach. He was a chassid. He was a Tommy. The Rebbe says, the Rebbe said to Avraham Avinu, you'll get Gemalit and you'll be a Tommy. He didn't say you'll be a Sholim. He didn't say you'll be perfect. He said you'll be Tommy. Tommy is not perfection. It's perfection plus. When a person is perfect, there is a certain feeling of being perfect. You look at him, he's the perfect specimen. Tommy means wholesome. Earnestness, seriousness, and being that in the most natural way. Reb Mailach embodied what the Rabbinish Mosaiden wanted of Tmimim and of Siddhim. How did he develop to have such a love for learning? To have such a love and such a feeling for Yiddishkeit, for Torah, for Chassidus? It was him, he was living it. That is what the Rebbe have given us in Tomchet Mimim. And Mailach made sure to try to bring it and to impress it on everybody. There is a word that we learn, and Tmimim and Bachim have heard it all the time. Achos atomim, but you demand of atomim is hanachas atzmusa, to put yourself a little bit on the side. Don't think about yourself. Don't think, even when you learn, even when you grow in things, it's not for your own perfection. It's because the Eibishter wants us to do. We want to be closer to the Eibishter. Hanachas atzmusa. And when you do things because you have to do it, not because you want to get better, not because you want to be greater, not because you want to accomplish things, but you want to do what the Eibishter wants, then everything looks different. Then your whole approach to things is different, and then it's the most natural way people see that it is natural. I'm not going to let me tell you a story. A very, very interesting story I heard at the Simchas Torah. The Rebbe sometimes used to tell the Gabayim on Simchas Torah who to be mechabed with hakafos. Was one time by Hakaf, and the Rebbe said to call Tmimim to go to the Hakafos. Was a young man, all of a sudden he died in an accident. His brother was in Namda, Daniel Namda. So a very, very fine, a very fine person. He didn't go to Chokmes. He took a Sefer Torah and he's dancing with the Sefer Torah. By that aliyah, by that Hakaf, the Rebbe said for Tmimim. He's passing by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe asks him, "Du bist a Tommy?" And he said, "Yes." The Rebbe smiled and he went up. They went over to him and said, "Daniel, the Rebbe asked you if you are a Tommy, and you said yes. You've never learned at the Brit Mimim. You've never learned in yeshiva." He was about yeshiva. He never even spent a day in yeshiva. How did you say it? I said, "I'll tell you the truth. I don't know what the Rebbe asked me. I didn't hear and I didn't understand. But you never say no to the Rebbe." The Rebbe asked him if he's a Tommy. And why did he say yes? Because you don't say no to the Rebbe. The Rebbe accepted him as a Tommy. And the Rebbe said it. Tommy, the Mailach even extends to people that learn in other methods of Lubavitch, the people that support Tomchet Mimim and so forth. The Rebbe is very inclusive. He gives everybody the kittens. So we are here, and we remember a Mailach, greater than life, but his inspiration lives on. Let us be inspired, continuously be inspired. It's going to be a schus for his neshama, it's going to be a schus for his family, and a schus for us all. And so the Eibishter gave everybody lange gesunte Yomen, and we should see him down here. Take it from Miyad Mamish. Julis mit der Geula mit der Schlepp.
Another hallmark, which again by me was also I saw because I worked a little bit with Mailach in the years I was here on Shurim and Chassidus. Mailach, we've met, Rabbi Volshansky just mentioned about being a Tomim. And one of the inyanim that came about, so to say, with the Isyastus of Temchei Tmimim, and continues on, is the fact that a Tomim that learns at Temchei Tmimim remains a Talmud. Many Elter Chassidim who always used to sign off when writing to the Rebbe, used to sign off Hey Tov HaTalmud. You were always a Talmud. You were Bacher in Temchei Tmimim. You could have been 95 years old, but you're a Talmud. Mailach was an eternal Talmud. I was working on the Shurim, so I was Zayin so it's a lange Yoren of Reb Yael. Reb Mailach had a kviyas, I heard this from Rabbi Pekarsky, to listen, I think, each day to a shir of Reb Yael. He was Reb Yael's Talmud, he would say it all the time, and he was an eternal Talmud. He knew his shiurim back to front. I worked on the shiurim. He of course, when it came out in print, he had read it all in 3 days, and he came back to me with 2 mistakes that I had made. I listened to the tape 10 times, but he knew it, and he came back with me with mistakes. Ich hab nicht verstanden, and he was right. To always learn, to always listen. As I mentioned before, you've never finished. You're a Talmud, you always learn, you always take in, Amayas, Avort, and it didn't matter from who, from where. You learn, and you constantly are Talmud, you're constantly learning. Again, Baruch Hashem Temchei Tmimim, Reb Shalom Spalter, to please give us a few words.
I think one of the great things of Mailach, in addition to what was spoken here before, is that Mailach's bittul, and it was actually mentioned before that there wasn't a person whom he met, who he acted and gave the other person to feel that he is superior to him, and I gave everybody the feeling that we're all equal. I myself experienced it many times, but before that, I just want to say that Be'etzem, knowing Reb Mailach, in reality, his personality does not appreciate what we are doing here tonight for him, talking about him. He was such a person who did not enjoy being spoken about in public. But by Hashgacha Pratis, I saw this morning a sikha from the Rebbe, a very short word. The Rebbe says, we know in this week's parsha is repeated the story of Eliezer going and finding a wife for Rivka, and Rashi brings down the famous saying of Yofis Sichosan Shalav the Oves, Yesem and the Rosh Shalbonim, and therefore it's repeated many times. And the Rebbe asks a very interesting thing, that the Kfitzas Haderach, that Eliezer had Kfitzas Haderach, is not repeated. It's mentioned only once amongst the whole story, which is repeated over and over. That point is not mentioned twice. Where is it mentioned? Not when it happened, only when Eliezer told Psuel and Lavan about his journey. Over there he says, Va'ovi hayoy melayoy alaoy, and that's when he told the story of Kfitzas Haderach. And the Rebbe brings out, because to talk about the Inya from Kfitzas Haderach, the whole point was not important. The only importance was in order to have an effect on Psuel and Lavan. That's where it was important to speak about it. Same thing, I was just like thinking, speak about the Mailach, speak about his greatness and everything, as we mentioned, Avachayit and Libei, but there is a specific thing that it's very easy for everybody to take from his way of life, his geniality Oder man hat a Kopf, oder man hat nicht einen Kopf. Yes, the Hasmada to sit and learn, fine, that's mentioned, everything is right, but his bittul and his giving everybody else to feel that you are equal and you are not, I'm not greater than you, this is a thing that any person in the world can emulate him and repeat and copy from him. I remember myself when I came to yeshiva many years ago. I was very young, and Mailach was already a senior, older, a little older, a lot older. Right in the beginning, he took me in and made me feel welcome. He would come over after I finished English. He would ask me, "Was hast du gesagt, Hein? Lass mich hören." He would, as if interested what I had to say, he would listen, and they would either argue, not argue, but he always made me feel that I was important. I'm an important person, just like anybody else, just like about 2 years into my being here, he took me into the Mareches of Ahoris at Mimim, which we know all the years he was a Mareches, and he gave me over that I should be the one to decide. He took me in to help him out, but he then, every time there was a question that had to be decided in the Ahoris, he would send a bochrim that they should ask me what my opinion is, and he would act on that, even though I was just a beginner in it. I remember a very interesting thing when the Rebbe started answering B'Ksav Yad Koche on the Ha'oris at Mimim, and we used to get the actual Ksav Yad Koche from the Rebbe. I remember a Mailach calling me in the room and discussing with me, and says, I think that we should not keep those Ksav Yadayim for ourselves, but we should let the Bochrim who are working, they should keep the Ksav Yad from the Rebbe. Now, can you imagine? We're getting the Ha'oris at Mimim back from the Rebbe. The Rebbe's Ksav Yad, the Rebbe wrote footnotes to answer or to whatever it is, and he was willing. It's a thing which, when I repeat the story today, it's people say, "What? They don't believe it." But this is what the Mailach was, as mentioned before. Hanochas atzmusei. He didn't think about himself, and he influenced me. The same thing. Don't think about yourself. Give it away to the bochrim. They have to feel empowered. They have to feel important. Let them have it. Many years down the road, when I was a mashgiach at the yeshiva, he would then tell me a certain bochrim who didn't show up to learning or didn't come to the shir, whatever it was, don't let him come in until he has a note from me saying that he can come in. Every single note that I would receive always said, please no lahachnis es habochor hachoshuv, habochor hanale. Because he knew the note is being given to the bocher is going to read it, he's going to give it to me. He wrote, habocher hachoshuv, habocher hanale. Empower the bocher, make him feel worth $1 million. Reb Mailach wrote about me that I'm a choshuv bocher. What the bocher thought or not, but this is what the Reb Mailach is. I just feel, I don't know how many more people are going to be speaking. I saw Reb Mailach always participated in writing the Horas at Mimim. Everybody knows he had a famous pen name, Aleph Rosen. It's a family name. I would just like to share one little thought, a very interesting thought Reb Mailach wrote, and with that I will conclude. Reb Mailach pointed out that the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, right in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, when the Alter Rebbe writes that you have to get up in the morning, Skabe Kari, and to get up, the Alter Rebbe writes in we know that the first Simonim have a Madura Basra. In the Madura Kama, the Alter Rebbe writes that when a person is laying in bed, he should realize that the Eibishter is standing in front of him, and that will bring him to get out of bed quicker. The Alter Rebbe brings down the Pasuk, Es HaShamayim v'es HaOretz Ani Moli. In the Madura Basra, the Alter Rebbe writes the same thing, but instead of bringing that Pasuk, he brings the Pasuk Moli Kol HaOretz Kaveda. And Reb Mailach asked, why over here does he bring this Pasuk, and why over there does he bring that Pasuk? The year Reb Mailach wrote it was right after the Rebbe printed the Madura Kama of Tanya. And when the Rebbe, when it was printed, the Madura Kama was printed, the Rebbe spoke a Sikha in the difference of the Madura Kama and the Madura Basra, that the Madura Kama is at the beginning of Avodas Hashem, Madura Basra is when a person is further advanced in Avodas Hashem. So the Mailach said, just wrote a little comment. He wrote that we can say maybe the same thing is also in the Shulchan Aruch, Madura Kama, Madura Basra. Madura Kama is in the beginning of Avodas Hashem, and that's why he brings the pasuk, it says Shemayim V'Soretz Animoli, which is Chassidus brings that goes on the darga of Soiviv Kolalmin, that there over there you don't realize yet, you don't know the difference between one darga and another darga, but once you start learning Chassidus and you go deeper into Aveda, you know more. Over there it brings down a pasuk Malik Aloretz Kavedei, which over there talks about the Kavedei of the Eibishter, which means over here you know the differences of one level and another level, and that's why the Alter Rebbe over there brings the pasuk of Malik Aloretz Kavedi. Anyway, as we are standing now on the Yortzait, right after the Yortzait of such a great man of the Mailach, we should all try to learn something from his life, V'chayit and Alibay, and the Ikir should be V'chakitza V'rananu Sheikh Niyafar V'hu B'seicham, we should be Zeichet to the Gula Amitis V'ashlema B'mheira V'yamenu Mamish.
As we draw this evening to a close, we'll ask Rabbi Pekarsky, Mashpia Yeshiva, to close it in a way of Peil Mamish, of some things that we could take. Obviously tonight, many things have been said that everybody in their own way, in their own matziv, in their own Indian can take in a Peil Mamish. We'll ask Rabbi Pekarsky to conclude the talk this evening.
Mailach had a chush, he would discuss a whole farbrengen for a few hours, and he would speak barichus about the greatness of Chassidus, of the Rabbeim, of Chassidim. But then he would draw the bottom line, and he would bring out that all these great madreges, it's negeya, it all comes out that a yid should be maves sedre shnayim mikra v'echutargum. He could take a whole farbrengen, Tes Kislev, and again, after he could speak half an hour at a time, and the conclusion of the whole thing, 3 o'clock in the morning, is to be maves sedre shnayim mikra v'echutargum. And then he would, as the farbrengen went more and more varim, he would call out bochrim. Are you going to be maves sedre? Nimm sich unter. The Bacher sitting next to him, he would call over a Bacher. Nimm sich unter, shnayim mikra v'echutargum. Are you maves sedre? That was one example. Another example was to daven minche with a minyan, bechlal daven with a minyan, and befrat to daven minche with him. He once verbring about a story from the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Frierdiker once said by a verbringen as atzmus nempe mit a minche, mit a poshte minche. There was a background to the story, but the punchline was the Frierdiker Rebbe said as atzmus nempe mit a poshte minche. So the Mailach was masber why? So he was masber bariches with the reiche stories, and b'shas you heard the stories, you were lost in the air and the whole habit of the farbrengen. Because you just kislev, shchedish kislev, by the big farbrengens. But it all came out about the mile of davening minche, and dafke with a poshete minche a yid kenemen atzmos. And from us, from the people by the farbrengen, what he was trying to bring out was that by all should be at the biggest chavivus. Both sides. He spoke about Gor Chassidische Bochrim that are involved deeply in the Shiurim and Nigle. But it comes the time that in Mincha you have to know everything on the side. Now, mit was nennt man Atzmos? Saying Asher, and Mailach was an example of that. Mailach was always here for Mincha, no matter what he was doing. He came in and he davened with a minyan, and there were many times where it wasn't poshet out a minyan. He used to call me in the house in these days like Yud Shvat, was in the yeshiva. Freund, first you're going to make a minyan, come, please pick me up, take me to daven. Another example of Reb Mailach's kochen sich in Peil Mamish. When he would verbring with the Balabatim, and even when he spoke to Yingolai personally, he used to demand to learn Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. Ayid has to know Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. And Omer Ve'isa. Every once in a while, in his man, he used to open a Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. There was a time when you saw on him his achlotis. Sometimes he made his achlotis berabim, he let it be known berabim. Other times he saw quietly his achlotis. He was once talking to the Yingolite about learning Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, and from then on you notice that he used to carry his tefillin like a Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. And every day after davening, he sat down in his Rashis and Zabinut Tams, and he used to learn for 5 minutes Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. And you saw him going slowly through Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. The Mailach was clear in the big Shulchan Aruch, after every Shulchan Aruch. More of a same idea, but the same nekuda. He once told me he would say over things, because he was like Rabbi Spalter and Rabbi Volshansky was saying, he was a nice person. He tried to include you. He tried to make you feel good. So he would say things, and I also think he said things to Yingolai, to give us hadracha, how we should look at things. So he once said, a Choshev Bacher just came over to me and he asked me which hemshech he should learn Chassidus. He was thinking of learning Ayin Beis, but I asked him, did he learn some Achvov? And the Bacher said he hasn't yet learned some Achvov. Aber ich habe gesagt, Avad ist to learn some Achvov. If you don't learn some Achvov, you don't have the basics of Yiddishkeit. Ich bin gerecht befragt, was trachst du? He's keep asking me if he's right. In his mind, you don't know some Achvov. How could you krich in Himmel learn Ayin Beis if you first didn't learn some Achvov? He says, Avada, the Chidushim von der Shmoseiden is beikir in Ayin Beis. Some Achvov, the Chidush is in the Binyan HaHemshech. The actual Maimorim are pretty much from the Mittler Rebbe, Chulu, Tzemach Tzedek. Oh, but some Achvov, das ist Yiddishkeit, some Achvov. Was ist a Mitzvah? Das ist for some Achvov. Was ist a Eved Hashem? Was ist a Neshome? Das ist some Achvov. How could you go... Wie can a Yid reis kommen von Teichet Mimim if he hasn't gone through the whole Hemshech of Samal Vov? Another very practical thing that Reb Mailach would always talk about, Berabim and Be'ikir, Be'yochid, and I guess because I was in yeshiva at this time of the day during davening, so he sort of made me also a little bit achroi on it, and he would speak his heart out on it, and that is the chazonim, but even Bochim and Yingolait and Yidden, that chapa davening, it poshet bothered him. And he always emphasized, and he said, the difference between a gechapte davening and a davening that b'mesinus is exactly 4 minutes, 3 minutes, maximum 5 minutes. That's the difference. And it's a difference of a davening or a fararai, a balagola. And he said, the chazonim are shuldig. The chazonim go up to the Amud and they chap the davening, and the whole congregation oozes out. And the Mailach had this sense of, like, he was a community person. So if the people were going, if the chazan went fast, he also went fast. And he complained about it. He says he doesn't have the taikif to slow down and daven by himself, be yechidus. He feels like he has to daven with the minyan, especially because they're going to wait for him Shemini Esrei maybe. So he always pressured himself to keep up with the minyan, and it bothered him. It bothered him a lot. It's interesting that Mamish, the week before he passed away, he came over to me twice. My Maitiv, we have our minyan in the wintertime, 7:45. And a few times that week, the chazan that went to Maitiv, chapped the Maitiv. He went very fast. In Maitiv, the difference between a fast Maitiv and a slow Maitiv, you start 7:45 and you end 7:53, or you end 7:55, 7:56. Mamish, a difference of 2 minutes. And then you say Krishma word by word, doing a mitzvah sassidei reise, the brachas, Krishmas, it's unbelievable brachas, and you still say Shemini Esrei, daven 5 minutes instead of 3.5 minutes. A difference, but it's Mamish. That's what the Mailach always says. A difference between Mamish and Yom V'Layla. He told me, Freim, du weißt, wenn ich mein, du darfst mit sie reden to go slow. Because usually by night the same chazanim go over. Now, unfortunately, we have chiyuvim, but when there's no chiyuvim, the same few guys always run over to the Amud. He says, you know what I'm talking about. I didn't ever say his names. They don't say names. Geh zu sie und red mit sie. Dann, like, then, mamish, the same week, he called me into his office in the morning and he says, you have to take care of this, that in the Zal, there should be a system of chazonim who goes to the Amud, and a system of time, take 15 minutes, so he says, are you going to take care of it? And he didn't mamish until I came back to him and I told him, I spoke to Rabbi Tunk and I took care of it. And Zochor, Rabbi Tunk, who soll sein gesund, who's Baruch Hashem, stands in the Mishpah and Yeshiva, and he makes the Chazonim 15 minutes Psukkah de Zimra, and then another 6-7 minutes Tushmin Esrei. It's not Chayde Daven. And this is Mamish happened this year, is the first year where it's really organized, I guess, in the schus of Reb Mailach, and thank you very much, Rabbi Tunk. So, Al Kolponim, in the ruach of what Rabbi Tubov mentioned, practical Peil Mamish, the Mailach could speak in the heavens. He could, and he knew how to. But he always wanted, his chush was, he was practical. Every Fabringen, he demanded a Even Aboichem, he demanded a Bechein. And the Bechein was to add 5 minutes in learning. To add, come 7:25 instead of 7:30 to say that. Be 9:25 in your film instead of 9:30. He never had malachim. With himself, nobody knows what he demanded from himself. But from others, and this is the chush, this is the hatzlocha. V'achayit in elibe, we should go away from this night to night. Everyone should take upon himself for your own schus, and this will be Leilu Nishmas Reb Mailach, and it's Chof Cheshvan, tonight is Teim Chetmimim, to take a hachlot o teva, to take daven b'mesinus. Davening b'mesinus, literally to add 2-3 minutes in davening. You say word by word, pasuk by pasuk. And Reb Mailach, another good midah of Reb Mailach was he always looked in his siddur. He never looked up. There was once something in yeshiva which was bothering me. A certain individual was doing something during davening, it bothered me. And I spoke to him about it. He says, yeah, azoi, ich weiß nicht, ich hab nicht bemerkt. He tells me like, so der Emes, ich guck nicht rechts von siddur. Like he told me, like, I guess he was trying to tell me, why are you seeing it? And you saw he didn't look out of his siddur. He also wore his talis over, not over covering his eyes, his talis he used to put covering. It was uncomfortable to wear talis that way. He covered all his ears and his head lower. That's the way he davened, looking in his siddur, not look out of his siddur. That's a beautiful achlot, something that's going to, and it'll change your life, you'll see. You'll daven shachris azay, mincha azay, be mavis sedre shnayige vechot targum, be mak bit fila bit sibun. Reb Mailach was to look into his siddur b'chazoros hashatz, baruch hu shmei omein, shulchan aruch hu shulchan aruch, adin is adin, and this way will be lichtige tmimim, lichtige yidden, and gorim gichins will be united with the Rebbe and all the Rebbe's chassidim and Reb Mailach b'seicham. Good enough.
In a minute, we'll conclude with Mishnais and Kaddish. Just 2 announcements. Again, on a practical level, there's been signs around about library, Sifriyas Reb Mailach, and all those who are interested, we encourage everybody to donate a Seifers Forum to the library, and Shneir Harkin is the bocher to go to. Secondly, there'll be a Fabrengen right after we finish with Reb Pitcher Bevsner, a Talmud of Reb Mailach over here in Morristown. Upstairs in Zal in Temchet Mimin. We ask everybody to participate for Chav Cheshvan, and Nachman soll sich treffen auf Simches, bis Mashiach und gleich soll sein Mashiach und Kitzer rein Mashiach in Yokor, und mit Teuch und Teuch Al Yisrael. We'll say a Mishnah, we'll say Zom Kaddish.
Yeah. Yeah, you're fair. Well done.
Alex.